Okay, today's clip is all about computer memory. Okay, and specifically the four sort of key points, which are about RAM, which is random access memory, ROM, which is read-only memory, virtual memory, and then a little bit about flash memory, which is what RAM chips are made up of. So, firstly, as you know from when we've learnt about the CPU, as instructions are being fetched and decoded and executed, the computer requires super fast memory in order to be able to store those instructions before they're decoded on the journey from the hard drive to the CPU. The random access memory is a really important part of that process. It's quicker than the computer's hard drive, so it's much faster and gives you a better user experience. That's one of the reasons why the more RAM you have, the better your computing experience is if you're multitasking, for example. And in a way, it acts like short-term memory in human beings, quickly recalling important information. But once it doesn't need that information anymore, it gets forgotten. It gets wiped from the memory. And don't forget that RAM is volatile memory, and that means that the contents are constantly changing. And when the computer's powered off, the contents are wiped. There are two main types of RAM. There's dynamic RAM, DRAM, and there's static RAM, SRAM. Now, the ROM on your computer, the job of the ROM is to have a set of important instructions that don't change. These instructions most commonly are used at the start-up process of a computer. When you press the power button, how do all of the components know what to do? The instructions are stored on the ROM. And this is an example of read-only memory, or in fact that's what it's called, and it's non-volatile. That means it doesn't change and the memory is stored even when the power is turned off. Okay, so what happens then when you run out of RAM? Well, when you run out of RAM, your operating system will then start to create some virtual memory. So it will take a section of the hard drive and start to use that in the same way that RAM is used. Now, obviously, because we've spoken about it before, RAM is quicker than the hard drive. So when this happens, the user experience on the computer will start to slow down and it will be noticeable. But this is a computer's way of making sure that the computer can keep functioning, the operating system's way of making sure that your computer keeps functioning, even though you're pushing it to the limits of what it's able to do. So if you're running lots of applications all at the same time, you may quickly fill the RAM up, and then the virtual memory will start to kick in. That's a good way of keeping the computer going, but that's why, again, we say the more RAM you've got, the better the user experience, the quicker your computer will seemingly run. And then finally, just a little bit about flash memory. Flash memory was developed from early ROM chips and is both programmable and erasable. Unlike with RAM, data stored in flash memory will remain when the power is disconnected. So, you'll already be thinking about different types of flash memory that you've experienced, like SD cards, for example, and solid-state drives and pen drives that you put into a USB port. Some computers now use flash memory instead of ROM to store BIOS, and the BIOS is something that can be upgraded by the manufacturer to add system improvements. And although flash memory is expensive, its durability, size and speed mean that it's replacing many optical and magnetic storage solutions. So the latest laptops, the latest computers are shipping with solid-state drives rather than magnetic hard drives. And more commonly now you're seeing, particularly this is true of Apple products, where the CD-ROM or the disk drive is being dispensed with entirely. That's to make the devices thinner, but also because flash memory is becoming more commonplace. So that's a quick recap on different types of memory. Just to summarise that dead quick, we've talked about the RAM, the random access memory, super fast memory that's used for quickly dealing with instructions as they're being decoded and as you're sort of multitasking. All of the different instructions and programs that are running will be stored in the RAM. The ROM, which has got the information needed to boot up the computer. Remember, RAM is volatile, ROM is non-volatile. Volatile meaning it's constantly changing and it gets wiped and the power's off. Non-volatile meaning it never changes and the memory remains intact later on. If you run out of RAM at some point, your virtual memory will kick in. And don't forget that the fastest memory there that we're talking about, things like the solid-state drives and the ROM, they can be made up of flash memory, and a little bit more will come about that later on.